Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The Future Leaders of Yale Lean-In Mentorship program offers a series of 4 to 5 panel discussions each academic year focused on career development topics pertinent to the FLY constituency. Today's session, Basic Job Search and Interview Skills, is also sponsored by the Asian Network at Yale, Diversibility at Yale, Yale Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer Affinity Group, the Yale African American Affinity Group, and the Yale Latino Networking Group. So thank you to all of our sponsors today. Our distinguished panelists include 2 representatives from Human Resources, a hiring manager from one of the graduate schools, and a recently successful job search candidate. The panelists will discuss the importance of cover letters, qualifying through your resume, building confidence and owning your search, incorporating your own creative style, as well as reviewing the career development resources available to job seekers. Now, we do have time at the end of the program for your questions, so please put them in the Q&A as you think of them, and our panelists will respond to them at the end of the program. Angelina, would you like to introduce our panelists?
Great, thanks, Karen. I'm delighted to introduce our panelists today. Donna Espenberg is the Senior Director, Radiology and Biomedical Imaging, Therapeutic Radiology, and Laboratory Medicine. She has been the Clinical Lead Administrator in the Department of Therapeutic Radiology since the summer of 2012. Donna oversees the hospital-based radiation oncology section of the Spinal Cancer Center. In addition to being a United Way champion, she is actively involved in a number of university-wide and medical school initiatives, and she currently co-chairs the Yale School of Medicine Heart, Head, Hands Committee for Staff Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Welcome, Donna. Deb Lindenman has spent her 20-year career helping both individuals and organizations reach their potential. Her experience is comprised of working in both leadership development and career development within higher education, paired with time spent in human resource performance and change management on the corporate side. Deb is currently the Associate Director of Talent Development at Yale, where she helps employees pursue their short and long-term goals within the university. She is an Associate Certified Coach through the International Coaching Federation. Welcome, Deb. Andrew Sowers joined the Yale Cardiovascular Research Group as Assistant Administrator in November 2012 after serving as the bookstore manager at Yale Divinity School for 5 years. Before coming to the med school, he actively pursued diverse experiences in nearly every available arena at the diversity school to review and enhance his managerial and administrative talents. Now, he utilizes those cultivated skills to serve as the point person for departmental policies and practices, to provide administrative and operational support, and to coach and lead departmental personnel in all operations management issues. Andrew received an MA and an M Divinity before earning an MAR from Yale Divinity School in 2015. He's taken advantage of multiple training programs offered by Yale, including navigating conflict, mastering difficult conversations, managing remote staff at Yale, communicating for results, project management for Yale professionals, workflow management, and the Aspiring Manager Program. Welcome, Andrew. And lastly, Lisa Treat Perry is a recruiter in staffing and career development and has been at Yale for 3.5 years. Lisa has over 20 years of diverse experience as a business professional, working in both nonprofit and for-profit environments in human resources, training and development, business operations, program and project management, and education. She has extensive experience as a human resource professional specializing in talent management, career development, employment law, and organizational effectiveness. Lisa holds a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Rhode Island and is a certified Level 3 Train the Trainer and educational consultant through the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, the Connecticut Education Consultation Network, and a career development advisor through the Council of Professional Recognition. In addition, Lisa is also a certified yoga therapist. Welcome, Lisa, And thank you to all of our panelists. Now I'll turn it over to Karen to introduce a quick poll question.
Thank you, Angelina. Before we begin to hear from our panelists, we want to hear from all of you about your current job search status. Let's see, here we go. You should all see a poll question pop up at the bottom of your screen. Please indicate which situation is most like yours. I am actively seeking a new role. I am considering seeking a new role in the near future. Or I am content in my current role, but I am interested in the process and resources available to me. We have a lot of responses coming in. I'll give it just a few more seconds. Okay, let's see here. And I'm going to share the results. So it looks like it's a pretty even split. We have 33% of our guests are actively seeking a new role. 35% are considering seeking a new role in the near future, and 36% are content in their current role but interested in the process and resources available. So this is good context as we turn to our panelists. Angelina, would you like to get us started? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Karen. All right, well, Lisa, understanding that the cover letter is an important aspect of the application, how does one incorporate their unique, creative style into their cover letters to stand out in the application process?
That is a great question. And first I want to say thank you for everyone joining in today. It truly amazes me how many employees at Yale are so interested in career development, because every time we hold sessions such as this, it's amazing the turnout. So I do want to thank you for taking the time today to join in on this session. So with that said, the cover letter. So the cover letter is extremely important, and one of the things that I do see regularly is a lack of a cover letter with an application. So if you were to take away one thing from me answering this question, please make sure to include a cover letter with all of your applications. You want to think about making them individualized, specific to the position you're applying to. And you want to look at it from the perspective that you want to understand more about the department. You want to look at mission, vision, anything that's going to capture your interest into the position, and then you're going to translate that on paper, because when you're applying to a position, chances are the people that will be receiving that information do not know who you are. So that is the best way for you to show them who you are as a professional, adding some skills, bullet points, anything that's relatable and transferable that you can capitalize on with some type of personal twist, personal, not disclosing any personal information, but personal about yourself enough to show something that would make you stand out as a top talent or top candidate for the position. So definitely include a cover letter. Make sure you add some technical skills, your experience, and anything that you have learned about the department, so that they can see you in the position, and they really can start seeing you as the professional and the top candidate for the position.
Thanks, Lisa. And now, if a job application does not specifically ask for a cover letter, would you still recommend including it?
So yes, it depends. We will depend on bandwidth, on how many applicants are in an actual requisition. I will reach out and ask them to submit a cover letter if I know it's important to the manager. Something else that is also important to know, managers will use that as a way to evaluate writing. Or your writing abilities. So that's another reason why a cover letter is extremely important. So for the most part, I will reach out if I need to. However, again, bandwidth, I might not have the ability to. So you just always want to make sure you're owning your search and owning all the materials that you upload and put into your application, because you have a complete package then.
Thanks, Lisa. Mm-hmm. We'll turn it over to Deb now. Deb, can you share what strategies you would recommend to job seekers to build and maintain their confidence and to keep it all into perspective?
Yeah, let's touch on perspective first. because I think that kind of comes first. Like, look, this is a tough market. We're in a pandemic. You've heard the unprecedented times a million different ways, and it kind of applies to this now too. There is a hiring pause at Yale, but you have to throw some positivity in there too, because things are looking up. And when a job is open, they're going to hire someone. So why can't it be you? If anyone can do it, you can. That's kind of always my thought. And the career cheerleader inside of me says, you can do it. You kind of have to go in positive, because what's the alternative? Let's say you get a rejection or 2 or 3, you still have to dig deep and find that positivity, because if you go in feeling negative or down on yourself, or that rejection is showing, then the recruiter or the hiring manager or whomever you're interviewing with in the process can pick up on that. And you just kind of have to find that way to stay positive. And my thought, if you do get rejections, because we all do, right? You kind of take it with a grain of salt. You spend the day or 2 saying, I might feel upset about that or whatever. And then you got to move on. You got to move forward. You can't dwell on something for too long. And so then it's, okay, what's next? What am I pursuing next? Just keep opening doors, whether that's applying to jobs, that makes sense for you in your career, or if that's networking. And you're going to have a lot more networking conversations than you will applying to jobs, because you only really want to apply to the ones that you're targeting. You don't want to kind of blanket apply or apply to too many. And I'll let Lisa talk to that if she wants, but you really want to have a strategic approach. But networking, my thought is, you can never have too many conversations. You can never learn too much. You can never establish too many relationships. You got to keep going and keep opening those doors, even if there isn't a job available, because then when one does come up, you can say, oh, I talked to you a couple months ago and saw that there was something posted in Stars and wanted to follow up, etc. And then my last thought about this is, when it does happen for you, and when you do get that job, make sure you circle back with everyone you spoke to. Keep track of your networking efforts, because that makes a difference. Whatever job you get next might not be your last job before you retire, or your last job at Yale. And you may be looking for one 5 years from now. You want to keep that network, good and fresh, and have positive relationships. And that does include circling back with everyone to say, hey, I finally landed. I'm so excited about this position. I just want to share it with you, and thank you again for speaking with me. And, I think what ties into that too is pass on the good networking karma. When someone reaches out to you, accept the meeting and network with them, because think about when you reach out to people in network and they ignore you, that it just kind of hurts a little bit. So you really want to just have that good networking karma and try to help people, and, hope that when you're asking for help, that people help you back. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Deb. Great advice for navigating the job search during a really unusual year here at Yale. Now I'll turn it over to Donna. As a manager, Donna, how do you develop your staff for advancement in their current role or for a different role? And what university resources, if any, do you use?
So I would say the self-awareness is definitely key. What you're capable of, what you want to do, and what you could possibly do in the future. It's important to have those conversations with your manager. So I'm a big fan of stretch assignments. So if I'm talking to someone who works for me and I know that they eventually want to do something, let's say in central accounting, I'll try to get them hooked up with a stretch assignment, if it's a job shadow, or just even conversations, introduce people so they can have informal conversations. I like pairing people up with external peers outside of the department, maybe in another department. There's more than one way to skin a cat here at Yale, and no way is the wrong way, and there's so many right ways to do it. So it's great to kind of get a different perspective. Some people are really process oriented, some people are big picture oriented, so it's nice to get a kind of an amalgamation of that. I use a lot of resources at Yale. I'm a big fan. I go to every single course that I can ever squeeze in, and sometimes I go to them multiple times. Early on, someone mentioned, I think Andrew went to a lot of these courses. Inside Out coaching is an important one. Self-awareness. Take a look at yourself, reflect. What am I really good at? what do I need to hone, even at my level, what do I need to hone if I make a mistake? How can I avoid doing that in the future? So self-awareness is really important. So inside out coaching is very helpful. Managing conflict, right? If you're going to move up in the world or move to a different position where you don't know people, or you're going to be managing staff, you have to be able to understand how to get the most from people, and then also with those difficult and awkward times, how to handle them. Difficult conversations, I'm a huge fan of that one. I have like 9 books in my office, and when I have new people, I give them a book and say, read it, and go see Kirk Hooks in OD and see if you can get hooked up with one of those courses. And I want to piggyback on what Deb said about networking. I've been at Yale for 12 years. I meet people at different functions, and people reach out to me 1, 2, 3, 4 years in. Hey, I'm looking to come to the med school. Do you know what's going on? Any advice for me? Should I make a lateral move? Should I go upwards, downwards? So networking is super important here, and reflecting. So self-awareness is really important. And I also have this competency grid, and I can share some of the resources with Angelina. Will send them out. And I ask people to do it confidentially. So it's a competency grid on do you demonstrate potential to mastery? I don't want to know your answers. I just want you to look at it and know where you are on the continuum, and then get your own personal best, right? So I think I answered the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. That's great. And I'll also add in a plug for Inside Out Coaching. It's a great course, and I would highly recommend folks look into it the next time it's offered. Thank you. All right, turning it over to Andrew. Andrew, you've utilized many of the resources available to job seekers. Which resources did you find most valuable, and why?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Also, just as a point of reference, when I was first looking for a job, it was before a pandemic. So some of those early resources for me were in person. So that's different than, but half of my time was doing it during pandemic. So it's virtual. So it's, in my experience with it, I also wanted to say that my experience is just my experience. It's not the only way to do it. It was just the way that I do it. It might not even be the right way for you. So I'm just sharing with you what I did. So for me, the 2 most important resources were Deb and Lisa. And they're on this call, honestly, and I'm not just trying to toot their horns because they're here. That was seriously, working with HR was the most important thing because it built my confidence in what I was doing, because at the time that I started looking for a job, my direct supervisor had retired. So I didn't have a direct report necessarily. I mean, I did, but then the person above that I would have reported to, she took another job a few months later. So I was really kind of on my own. So talking with HR was very important for me to kind of just have some guidance of what should I do? What should this look like? Because I was so ignorant. But that's where I started. And even though I've taken a lot of classes, in those classes, I made a network. And if I were to say, if there's a resource, it was the networking was the most important to me, because I would talk to one person that would encourage, hey, I've got a friend over here. You should talk to them and get some advice from them. And that would lead to another person. And then it was just, none of those people actually led to a job there, but it built my confidence. It built knowing how to do things to where I could actually call on these people later and be like, hey, I saw this. Is that something I should consider? And they would totally guide me. So it was so helpful to just build that connection. And so there are a lot of resources. All those courses that I've taken, they were also helpful, not just in like landing that next job as far as like learning those skills, but it was important for me to learn like who I am. It was like refining myself. It's many times as I wrote that cover letter, it was not the same every time with just a different heading or something like that. I revised it every single time. So it was like, who am I? Where am I going? What did I learn? And so just the whole process brought me to that next thing. And so all of those resources that HR provide helped me to understand myself so that I could be better prepared for the jobs. So that's it.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you sharing your personal experiences. All right, we'll turn it over now to Karen, who will moderate our second round of questions.
Thank you, Angelina. I'm going to turn to Deb. Deb, can you please describe for us what it means to own your own job search and how an action plan with short-term and long-term goals can assist job seekers?
Yeah, sure. So you've probably heard that phrase, you own your career, right? And it's true. Even if you have the most supportive manager in the world and the most supportive organization, like it's you. You own it. You're the one that can take development opportunities or pursue them if they're not necessarily offered to you. You're the one that creates the change and the motion in your career. So it's important to advocate for what you want and speak up for what you want. So you own your career management and your development plans and your goals. But remember too, you've got Yale, the organization, and your manager there to support you. So we talked earlier about having career conversations. I think Donna was addressing this. And, you know, as a manager, she's having conversations with her staff, but it's also important for you to talk to your manager and approach that and address your manager to say, these are my career goals, because they can't help you if they don't know. And despite that our managers are really good, they're not mind readers, like nobody is, right? So you have to tell them what you want, and then you can work together to figure out how to get it. So just remember, your manager is there to support you, you know, and you certainly have tools like the IVP that you can use if you feel like you need something formal assisting the conversation. But for us, we just want you to have the conversation so that they can help, because they may see opportunities coming down the pike that they can help, you know, educate you on that you may not know about. And then remember, of course, the organization, Yale, we're here to support you. You know, like Andrew's saying, he tapped into Lisa and I, and we have tons of resources online. You know, you can meet with a recruiter, you can meet with a coach, you can meet with your generalist if you wanted to, but we're all here to support you, and you should look into what we have as well. I can pop a link in the chat in a minute for our career website, but you know, we've got guides on experiential learning opportunities. We have classes on career development. You know, we have resources to help you find the right mentor for yourself. So you have to take charge of that. And when I think about action plans and short and long-term goals, you know, I always tell people, think 2 jobs ahead, because then you can think about, all right, what's going to help you get to that next stage. And sometimes things come up that we aren't planning or that are a surprise, or you're like, well, this isn't what my goal was, but let me entertain this. And you think about it. And sometimes the unplanned jobs are the best opportunities in your career and can totally lead you in a direction you hadn't planned. So I always encourage people to be flexible to those. But at the same time, you know, if this is your 2 jobs out and this other job is all the way over here and it's not going to help you get to here, then it might not be the right move. And that's why I feel like that long-term plan of thinking 2 jobs ahead will help you make decisions on, all right, what do I need to get from here to there? And that's where the networking comes in, to think through what's a great next stop for me, what's going to build my experience and get me to where I need to be. And you know, you can answer that from networking, from advice from mentors, from working with a coach, and helping discover what's going to be a right next step for you. So hopefully that helps. And I'm always happy to help one-on-one with short or long-term career planning as well.
That's very helpful, Deb. Thank you, and insightful. I'm going to turn to Donna now. Donna, as a hiring manager, you have interviewed many qualified candidates. In your experience, what key traits or competencies do you find most important in a candidate? And moreover, how do you gauge or measure those traits during the interview process?
Okay, so I consider interviewing a very emotional, intimate activity, right? I'm trying to get in the mindset of how this person would be on my team, how I fit in with their goals. So key to me is preparation. If you come prepared, I will know it. If you looked on our website, if you got some names, if you looked at some projects, if you are prepared to chat a little bit about what you know about my departments, it's going to make me open up, and it's going to make the interaction much better, because the worst thing you can do is go on a job interview and wing it. You should you should cancel the appointment than just wing it, because people like myself who have interviewed hundreds of people are going to know that you didn't prepare for that. I look for people who are poised. So if you have the skill set because you already made it through Lisa and recruiting and staffing. So we know that you have the basic skills that you can do Excel, you can, work Word and everything else. So I'm not really looking to test you on that knowledge. So insofar as what is your creative problem solving? So I'm a big fan of behavioral questions. I'm not going to ask you what your strengths and weaknesses are. I'm going to say, you are presented with this and this. How do you think you would handle this? How do you think you would solve this problem? Because then I can see how that person goes through and thinks through a problem. They may not be familiar with the content, but if they're a creative problem solver, that's a person that I definitely want on my team. I also try to ask, I have grids set. I'm a very kind of organized paper person. So I have grids set up of questions, and I try to ask the same questions. If I'm interviewing, for, say, for example, like an accountant position, we get 15, 20, 30 applicants. How do I make sure that I'm really effectively evaluating everyone? I ask them the same questions, and then I have my own like 20 question grading grid matrix where I score you. So some people may be really strong in some of the areas where they get like an 85, 90, or 95, and maybe 70s in another section, but then another candidate comes along and they do overall well. I'll look and try to really see who's in the 90 percentile and above, and then look at those candidates and grade them against each other. So it's actually not a throw spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks. It's, you want to go through it in a very organized fashion so that you can justify the choice, right, of the candidate that you chose to be part of your team. But I think I handled all the questions here. But preparation, get dressed for the occasion, right? So I know we're Zooming, I know we're home, and we can put some casual clothes on when you're attending your meetings all day long. But if you're going for a job interview, go to your closet, try to get something out that really matches the importance of the occasion, right? So that's important in the whole picture.
That's very wise advice. Thank you, Donna. This next question is for Andrew. Andrew, if you would, please share how you secured your current position, including the amount of time devoted to your search, how many positions you applied to, and how many interviews you had before securing your current position. And what strategies did you use to keep an open mind and stay positive throughout the process?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I'm honestly, so I'm a little embarrassed to say, and if I were starting over now, it would be different. But at the time, like I said, I was very ignorant, and so I was just trying to find anything. I think throughout the whole process, I started in 2019, and I secured a job in November of 2020, or I started in November of 2020, and I probably applied to close to 100 positions. Not all of them were at Yale, and I probably interviewed 10 times throughout the whole process. Not all of those interviews were at Yale, and of all of that, in 18 months of doing it, one of them worked out. And so it was a long process. And I guess, how did I stay positive through it all? How did I land this position? I don't think, had I had this interview, the interview for the job that I have now, had I had that in the beginning, I don't think I would have gotten it, because I was prepared for it because of, basically, in other words, because of all the failures I had before. Those prepared me for this job at this time. And what's really interesting about the interview process is, with this one, is I actually did it differently than all the other ones, and I was prepared for it. I was asked to interview on the fly. I just sent a follow-up email, and they asked, when are you ready to interview? And I said, well, any time between now and this time next week. And they were like, if you're ready now, let's do it. And sent a Zoom link, and we did it now. And I was like, oh, now, okay. So at that point, you're like, I was only prepared to do it now because I had gone through that process so many different times before and made mistakes and learned from them, so that I could be better the next time. And so that's how I tried to stay positive. There were times where I really, really wanted a job, and I really thought it was going to work out. I was one of the final candidates, and it really broke my heart when I didn't get it. I mean, it's deflating when you feel like you failed that many times, but it's not a failure. I didn't look at it as a failure. I looked at it as an opportunity to grow and to get better, and I learned something from every one of them. And it doesn't mean that I just jumped back up and went right at it the next day. Sometimes I had to take a day or two to kind of decompress, because it hurts, but I had to keep moving forward and keep trying, and looked at it as just a new opportunity to learn something else and to be better the next time. So someone told me that it's not that you weren't good enough for that position, it just wasn't your time. So I just went to the next one and looked for when it would be my time, and then it eventually worked out. So that's how I did it.
Sage advice. Andrew, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your experience. I think it's helpful to know that other candidates are working through this long process as well. So we really do appreciate you sharing your experience and the, the emotional roller coaster that it is.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Turn to Lisa now. Lisa, what should be included on a resume to help a candidate qualify for a position and or stand out as the top candidate for a position? Is a professional summary profile statement important? Why or why not?
So first I'd like to just piggyback on what Andrew was saying. I worked with Andrew for a while and developed a relationship with him. And to me, he exemplified just such a positive person during the entire process. And there were many difficult conversations we would have to have, bumps or delays in the road, but he never gave up. And I think that is one of the main reasons why I thought he would be, so important to be heard, because it's relatable. So I just wanted to mention, his attitude and how he approached his search, even though it did take a while. He never gave up, and he was always so positive, and that did shine through with everything that he was doing. So I just want to, thank Andrew for being here, that he has. So with that said, going back to the resume, and Andrew knows I worked with him a lot with on his resume, what should be included? Your qualifications, your skills, your technical skills. I look at it as skills, what you've acquired, your competencies, your tasks, what you've done in a job, what you're currently doing in a job, and then any accomplishments that you can add. Doesn't have to be for all. You wouldn't have an accomplishment for everything, but anything that can bring your experience full circle. So your skills, tasks, and accomplishments bring it full circle, so that when a recruiter, me, is looking at your resume, we know exactly what you were doing. It is extremely important to have dates, months, and years, so that we can qualify you based on the number of years of experience you have. Of course, your degrees. And we're qualifying, like I said, on technical skills. So when you look at a requisition, you want to make sure that if it's asking for supervisory experience, that you have, and you've done supervising, you want to put that on your resume, because if you don't, we might not be able to qualify you because of it. And that does happen all the time. I say when you're building your resume, start big and then go through it and take out. It's easier to start big and take out versus not putting it in at all. And then again, we don't know who a lot of people are when they're applying. And that's, again, an introduction, how we know who you are if you're qualified. The entire job search is a journey. It can be a full-time journey. It can be a frustrating journey, but can also be very eye-opening and also very rewarding. Back to what Donna was saying, self-awareness is absolutely key. And when you start thinking about your job search, the very first thing you should do before you do anything is start thinking about your resume, getting it together, updating it, and then reach out you know, if you need career counseling to a recruiter, if you start looking or applying for a job, personalize it. And when I say personalize it, make it different or unique to the positions that you're applying for, but also broad, transferable, and general enough so that you're not just focusing on what you're currently doing or what you've been doing, especially if you're looking to make a slight change. So it's just really important to just go through it as though you were applying. It's a journey, and it's like a dive into yourself, and you'd be amazed at how quickly you remember things that you had forgotten you had done, and all the accomplishments. And now you're starting to build your confidence because you're writing it, and the connection between writing and putting things on paper, and it gets embedded, and then you start believing it, and then you start seeing yourself as in a different light. And it really does. I've seen the transformation happen. You know, I know just working with Andrew, what we went through with the resume and just building on it. And he's like, oh, I forgot I did that. And you just want to make sure you can speak to it confidently. You have that experience or that skill, you know it. You know, embellishing, that would not work if you can't speak to it. You want to just make sure your solid skills, how many years of experience you have, your degrees, who you are. That's how we're going to know who you are, and if you're standing out as a candidate that we can qualify for a position. Oh, and I'm sorry, the professional summary. Professional summaries are great. The one piece that I would recommend, it can actually work against you if you make it very specific. Now, if you're applying to the same jobs over and over, and that is the only type of career you're ever going to have, which is perfectly fine, then yes, it would be appropriate to make it more specific or related to exactly what you've been doing. But if you're a professional that has a broad range of skills, you would want to make sure you indicate that in your professional summary if you feel that you want to add a quick statement of who you are. And it should all tie back to your cover letter. So you have your cover letter as your bio in essence, and the position you're applying to, and any information about the department. And then you go into your resume, and that's just now expanding on it. Now you're basically saying, okay, this is really who I am, and this is what I've done professionally. And it brings it all full circle. And then you can just speak to it like a conversation on an interview, because you've already prepared from beginning and now to end when you bring it to the interview.
All great points. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for tying it back to the resume or the cover letter, so you can see how they really do go together and support one another in giving the hiring manager the full picture of the candidate. So thank you for that. I just wanted to remind our guests to please put your questions in the Q&A, and we will respond to them at the end. We've left plenty of time to answer any questions. And with that, I will turn it back to Angelina.
Thanks, Karen. And this is our final round of questions before we get to the Q&A session. So I'll begin with Donna. Donna, from a hiring manager's perspective, what advice can you provide to the audience to help them prepare for an interview?
So going back to the preparation, be prepared to tell your interviewer exactly what you do in your current job, right? That's important, because you may not know how to do the job you're interviewing for, and that's absolutely fine. But if you can't tell me what you do in your current job in painstaking detail, and say you have a job that has a lot of different facets, you should be prepared to say, listen, I have 20 different things that I do on different days, depends on the week, but let me walk you through a typical day in my life. That would be great. And now I'm going to sit there and listen intently and understand that this person actually has a handle on what they do in their current job. That's very important to me before you come onto my team. I want to know, if you were on my team interviewing for a job externally, I would hope that you would be able to explain in painstaking detail to the interviewer about what you do on our team. Another important thing is ask meaningful questions. Don't ask me about how many weeks vacation or about that. Ask me something meaningful that shows me that you actually thought about the job, the training. So you can say something like, what resources are there available for me to train on this position? What are your expectations for me short-term, mid-term, and long-term? what do you think the learning curve should be for me? So if I have a difficult position that's maybe a new position that nobody's been in before, I'll say, well, it's probably going to be, an 8 to 12 month learning curve. Maybe you could be shorter. Or if the job should be a 2 to 3 month learning curve, and you're sitting in front of me and you're thinking, wow, it's going to take me probably 8 or 9 months. Maybe your skill set isn't quite ready to go that next leap. But it's all up for discussion. But really be prepared to ask meaningful questions about the role, about the training, something that shows me that you prepared and picked apart the different parts of the job description rather. And I think walk me through a day in the life, and that would tell me so much.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate you providing examples of those meaningful questions, and it seems like asking meaningful questions is a really critical part of the interview process. So I'll turn it over now to Andrew. Andrew, please, would you mind sharing with us some of the steps that you took to prepare for interviews? What kind of research did you perform, and how did you practice interviewing?
Yeah, so with the interview, the human resources here at Yale, there are so many tools, and they would show me what are some difficult questions that you can prepare for, what are the medium questions, and what are kind of like the basic questions, which need to be reviewed as well to be able to talk about yourself and not ramble on about things that are unimportant. I work through primarily the difficult questions with my partner, because those are the type of questions that she asks when she's interviewing people, and she would just like sound the buzzer when it was like, nope, terrible response. And so, okay, let's do it again. So I practiced out loud, because practicing out loud for me is so much different than you think, or I think I know something in my head, but until I actually vocalize it, I'm like, wow, I actually don't have my thoughts together as well as I thought I did. And so saying it out loud, not just to myself, but also saying it to another person that's going to keep my run-on sentences accountable, was helpful for me in preparation, using those tools that Yale actually provides, which was really helpful. So beyond that, usually every interview I went into, they gave me the names of the people who were going to be there. It might have been one person. It might have been, there was one that had 5 people in it. At the time, it was in person, so it was all 5 of us or 6 of us in a room. And I did like recon on all of them, like not trying to be creepy. I'm not saying like look at their Twitter feed and be like, oh, I like what you posted the other day. Don't be weird, but like looking at where they came from. What are they doing? What are their professional interests? What do they do in their current position? There was one, for instance, that everyone else was some sort of science person, and then another person came, there was one person doing administration there that came from the humanities. And I related to that. So it's like, what do we share here? So I found my own connections with the group so that I could speak to that if need be, that I actually understand who they are and actually how I would fit in with this team. And I know that they say that, you know, they're interviewing me, but I'm also interviewing them. And I tried to take that to heart and actually know them so that I know, is this a team I want to fit with? That I fit with them? It's not just I'll take anything that's thrown at me, but do I feel like this is a group that I actually want to work with, that I feel like I can be productive with, and it has my best interest in mind too. So I would look up their profiles, look up LinkedIn, stuff like that, to try and get to know who they are, and bring that to the interview with me and practice out loud with another person, instead of just in my head or to myself. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Sounds like making those, personal and professional connections during the interview process is really key. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So next I'll turn it over to Lisa. Lisa, as a recruiter with Yale, can you please share with us the many resources available to job seekers and how to access them?
Sure. So I know that Deb had already provided a resource or two in the chat box, and we will as well. And Donna had mentioned some great resources as well. I always joke because I think Donna really wants to be a recruiter at heart, because she just loves doing this, and that's why we partner so well together. So thank you, Donna, for mentioning other resources. But basically, when you look at Yale in general, Yale promotes career development and career growth. We have so many resources. It is absolutely amazing. I find new things every day. You want to look if you go on It's Your Yale, Learn and Grow has everything. You can just type in the search box, Learn and Grow, and it'll come up. But that will take you to all different sections and links. There's an area for mentorship, for online learning classes, the TMS website, career development opportunities, the career development department, or area, sorry. There's just a lot of resources that you can take advantage of if you just take a tour on the website. And then there's also our career development opportunities that we have through staffing career development, the affinity groups, just this program alone, just being networking, signing up for the email notifications when events are coming up. I think it's, the more that you get involved in things and the more that you broaden what you're interested in, look for new opportunities. Again, those stretch assignments are absolutely amazing. Don't ever turn something down. If it's something that motivates you and you're interested in, and you can learn from it, take advantage of it. It presented itself to you for a reason. I'm here today doing this. I love training. This is a great opportunity for me to give back. So those are all things, when you look at it, that are going to help you not only professionally, but also personal growth and that continued self-awareness. So Learn and Grow website, It's Your Yale, the Staffing and Career Development Office. You can find everything online that you would need.
Thank you, Lisa. And just as a reminder to our audience today, we'll be in touch early next week with links to all the resources that we described today. So be on the lookout for that email. So finally, we'll turn to the last question for our panelists today, which I will direct to Deb. Deb, please share with our audience the development topics that can be an area of focus by a career coach and how one can maximize those resources.
Yes. So I am going to put in the chat our career coaching website, just so you have it. And again, Angeline's going to send this out. But this essentially lists, a plethora of topics. And really, you can do anything from like the transactional, hey, can you look at my resume or talk about how to prepare for an interview, to more strategic, how do I think about a short, long-term career plan? Or how do I talk to my manager about my career goals, especially if they don't align with the department I'm in or what I'm doing right now. Job crafting, and also talking to managers about having those career conversations with their staff as well. Basically, any question you have or topic you want to discuss regarding your career search is a career coaching appointment. And so feel free to reach out, and there's more information on that website on how to get an appointment. And, we have a couple of questions on the website we ask you to fill out in advance, and that just helps us direct you to the right person. So like, if you say, oh, I specifically want to work in this one area, and I know that Lisa's the recruiter for that one area, I'm going to send you right to the recruiter so that Lisa has the appointment, because it's a little more streamlined if you want to work there. But if you're thinking of, more general career advice, you can certainly come through this career coaching website, and, I can meet with you, and then we can talk about, all right, what are the next steps? I typically don't let anyone leave my virtual office here now without homework per se. There's always a follow-up and a to-do. And Andrew's laughing because, I think we had a few to-dos. Like, you're not gonna, I'm not gonna just listen and not, and have it be that. There's suggestions, there's start a networking list, there's, think about a plan to propose to your manager, do your IDP, whatever it is, there's always something as a follow-up. So job searches are hard. They're a lot of work. So come prepared to work. And when you're ready, you'll know you're ready. And, it's interesting because sometimes I'll see people and they might not be fully ready, but they just want to kind of scope it out, see what's out there, what help can Yale provide, listen and take it in, know about the resources, and then they might not come back to me for 6 to 8 months. And they just maybe weren't on the page of, okay, this is going to take this work. Because remember, going back to the earlier question, you own your job search. You also own the work that's associated with it. You know, Lisa's not sitting there calling people being like, hey, I think I have this job for you, so let's just, you know, get this going. You know, you're pounding the pavement, creating the relationships, doing the networking, etc. And so, you know, sometimes, like I said, people will come and check it out and then come back in 6 to 8 months. Or some people will say, this is great, this is so helpful. Can we set up an appointment right now for 2 weeks from now so that I can hold myself accountable, and I'm going to do all these follow-up things and come back to you with more questions. And we'll do that. You know, also some people just say, hey, look, I have this job I want to apply to. Here's the job description. I'm writing a cover letter. Can you take a second look? It's one and done, and I may not work with that person again, or I may have more regular appointments and establish a relationship moving forward. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Deb. That was certainly a helpful reminder that it's a partnership for sure, and that the job applicant is really responsible for owning their own search and you know, and working in tandem with all the resources and staff at Yale. So now I'm going to turn it over to Karen, who will moderate our Q&A session.
Thank you, Angelina. We have a lot of great questions. I'm going to start with one that actually came in the chat. This question is for Donna. How do you feel about being asked on flexibility with work schedule, working from home, etc., and other meaningful questions that will impact outcomes ultimately?
So I would say absolutely it's a meaningful question to ask about flexibility. Even before we hit the pandemic, some departments and some areas were able to offer flexible work arrangements. So I think it's an important question and definitely one that you want to entertain.
Great, thank you. The next question, and this I feel that maybe some or all of you could really chime in on this question. It's oftentimes I'll look at a description and feel that I have many of the requirements and relevant experience, but not all of it. I struggle with the level of qualifications I feel I need to meet before applying. What is your advice to either make that decision before applying, or to prepare to speak to what experience I do and don't have if given the chance to interview? Who would like to weigh in on that?
So I think that's I'd probably be the best person to start. So I think one of the most important things when you're looking at positions that you're interested in is to make sure you read the entire requisition. I think the first piece is the position focus. It should be written really well, that gives you some information and about the position itself, the department perhaps, what duties the position is going to require. And then when you go down and you start looking at the required skills and abilities and the required education and experience, that's really, you want to make sure that you have demonstrated in a professional capacity those competencies to be able to perform successfully in the job. So that's what we're looking for when we are looking at your resume or your application. And if you have not done a technical skill that's being asked for, then that probably would be a position that you might not want to consider at that time, or might need to grow into, or develop some more experience. So you really just want to match what your experience is, your current and your previous experience, to what the requisition technical skills are requiring. If it says demonstrated, proven, well-developed, strong, exceptional, you have to have that experience. You've had previously, currently. If it says ability to, there's a lot more flexibility there with how candidates are qualified. But the goal of our requisitions are to make it so people feel good about applying. They want to take the chance. Even if you apply for a position and you're not qualified, that doesn't mean we won't consider you for another position. You could, your application's in the system, we have your resume, and you could be the ideal candidate for something else that we're working on. So you just never know when you do apply to a position. But just trying to match your skills to the requisition, what's being asked, you perform the work, you can perform the work. That's like really the best place to start when you're looking at qualifying for positions. And then it comes naturally. If you're qualified, you go on the interview and you just continue to speak about your skills and your competencies and how they can see you in the position.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any feedback for that question? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. We do have quite a few questions regarding resumes. So the first question is, do you think an objective is helpful or necessary on a resume? Lisa or Deb?
Okay, go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Deb? Because I just, okay. It doesn't, I'm not going to qualify someone on an objective. I'm going to read it and I might be drawn in. It doesn't hurt, but it could, like what I was saying before in the professional summary and objective, if you make it very, very specific and the job you're applying for is not what your objective, your profile states, it's a different job than what's on your resume, then that's going to complicate matters. It might not present you as a candidate who has this transferable or related skill set and might just box you into one industry over the possibility of multiple areas or industries. So it's a personal choice. You just want to make sure it's very reflective of a culmination of all your experience, education, and skills when you're putting it together.
The only thing I have to add is, you know, if you're doing that, I'm going to call it right now, that thing at the top of your resume, you want it to be more of a summary versus an objective, because the objective is like, okay, my objective in my next job is to get a position that, and really it's not about what I want, it's about how I can add value to the position. And so if you're communicating something up there, and to Lisa's point, it's just a personal preference if you want that summary or not. I would make it some sort of summary. And in our resume writing guide, we have a few different examples. You know, you could call it professional summary or executive summary or whatever, you know, whatever makes sense for the job that you're going for. And I feel like a lot of different people have different feelings on this. So there's really, I personally think the only wrong way to go is to call it an objective versus summary. Because again, you can express your interest and enthusiasm in the cover letter, in the interview, but I don't think the top of the resume is the right spot for what you want. It's more of that summary of how you can add value if you're including it at all. And myself personally, I've toggled back and forth in my career if I've liked them enough to have it on my own resume versus if I don't want it on my resume. And so again, it's just personal preference and what you're looking for. I think if you're looking to make any changes in your career, you might use that space if you can to connect the dots, but that's probably more appropriate for the cover letter because that's hard to connect the dots in, you know, 1 or 2 sentences, which is all the summary should be.
Thank you for elaborating on that. Does anyone else have anything to add? Or should we move on? We'll move on to the next question. Great, so let's see. The next question is, hi, I am looking for a postdoc position in a lab, and they are asking for a CV, not a resume. What are the differences and what should I include on a CV? Lisa, Deb, Donna, anyone?
So that's actually, I did want to bring that up, the difference between the CV and the resume. When you are applying to a staff position, not academic based or heavily research based where you need to show publications, you want to submit a chronological resume because that's how we're qualifying you. It's a pretty simple formula: years of education, years of experience, and the technical skills that are required. So a chronological resume is going to do that. You can certainly add publications if it's calls for a research-based staff position. But if you are going for more an academic-based position, I don't do faculty or academic recruiting, so I don't even know necessarily what the criteria is when they are reviewing credentials. But I would say that the CV is more appropriate, or a hybrid version, a combination of the two. But for a regular staff-related position, it should be chronological.
Thank you for clarifying that. So our next question is, can you touch on the thoughts of 1-page versus a 2-page resume? Lisa or Deb? Or Donna, what's your opinion as well on a length?
I think if you are fairly new and you have a bachelor's and maybe 1 or 2 jobs, I think a 1-page resume, nicely done with all the information on it. I think if you're going into 3 pages, 4 pages, you better be a 30-year veteran with lots to say. So I think I like the 1-pagers and 2 pages at most, but I don't know, Lisa's really the expert at doing the screening for that.
Far from expert, but thank you. I appreciate the little plug. All right, so this is how I feel about it. If you're going to eliminate technical skills that can qualify you for your job because you're trying to get it on 1 to 2 pages, now you've just disqualified yourself from a job. I think that goes back to what I was stating, go big and then take away versus not include at all. It is appropriate if you are just, if you don't have a lot of professional work experience, you would only have 1 page. But you also don't want to make it too long and put everything on there. If you're an accomplished professional, you can stop at 15 years of experience. You want to also make sure that you're not looking at outdated software and outdated business principles that might have been applicable 20 years ago, but are not now. So that would be irrelevant. Why take up that space when you can add more value to the space of more current positions for the past 5 or 10 years. So I think, again, you look at your resume as an outline, you format it, whatever makes sense to you, your creative style. Don't put any pictures or anything personal in nature, birthday, how many children you have, if you're married or not. It's really irrelevant. We wouldn't even want that information, your social security number, anything like that, birthday. Just stick to the facts, but then you're looking at it as an outline and it just builds. And, after you go through it, you'll know what's appropriate and what you would want to leave off. Yeah. More information is sometimes better than no information at all, so.
Great, thank you for that. So another question I have regarding resumes is would you suggest that all the courses you take within Yale be on your resume? So I'm assuming this is the course is similar to what Andrew has taken that he shared earlier. Is that something?
I like to see them because then I know if you've taken crucial conversations and managing conflict, we can talk the same dialogue. We can talk the same talk and say, hey, start from hearts where you know your side of the story. So I think I wouldn't take up a whole bunch of space, maybe space with a slash, space, slash, but it's important for me for internal candidates to know what you've taken.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Donna. Let's see, following another resume question, is a gap on your resume an automatic kiss of death?
No. There are reasons or circumstances why people have gaps of employment. That was just from a personal perspective, that was always an area that I struggled with when I took time off to raise my children and then re-entering back into the workforce. I actually did at one point several years ago have a section that described, maternity leave or child rearing, and then put the dates. So I just put it out front, but then I realized I was putting too much personal information out there. Their gaps of employment are normal, they're common, and if you can speak to them in confidence and just format your resume the recruiter is actually the person that's going to vet any candidate anyway for those gaps. And then when we're passing them to a manager, we are making sure that they understand that we did our due diligence. We don't disclose any personal information or the reason for the gaps of employment, but we do, if the candidate is being referred, then there weren't any concerns. So not putting too much information, but just keeping it chronological and being able to speak to it in confidence. If you get an interview or even putting something in your cover letter, again, no personal information though.
I'd like to add something to that if I may, and Lisa and I have experience with this. Don't cover your gap with a fake date. You need to have those dates. When Yale does the background check, when you're a new candidate, for example, we're looking at the dates. So don't fudge them. It's okay if you could explain away that gap. We have children, we go to school, we do all kinds of things. We go hiking in the desert for weeks at a time. So it's okay. Just be honest with your dates.
That's great advice. Thank you. So this is a question you may or may not have the answer to this, but when will Yale open up job positions that were vacant prior to the pandemic? I don't know if either of you are able to answer that. Lisa, Deb, no.
So I don't know if there are positions that were taken down for budgetary reasons and for funding. So we wouldn't know if, from a recruiting or staffing perspective, we wouldn't necessarily know if a position is going to be reposted that had been pulled down. Obviously, we know when the decision's been made and it's gone through the approval process. But something I do want to mention that is really important, we still are hiring at Yale. I know that there's been some information put out about a hiring freeze, and how it's, the best way to interpret it is it's just being conservative and being very thoughtful with the necessity of the positions that are being opened up and posted. We are always committed to and always have been committed to our internal and layoff market, filling positions. So please, if you are interested in making a career move, there are positions out there for you to apply to. We are looking for our strong internal and layoff market if there's interest in a position. So don't let that confuse you that the hiring freeze means that there are not any jobs available and that you wouldn't be considered.
That's good to know. Thank you for clarifying that, Lisa. So our next question is how to sign up to get notifications about posted positions in STARS. I believe there is a like a search, right? Isn't there a search that you can apply for and then you'll get notifications? Deb, Lisa?
That's exactly it. There's a job search agent, so you just have to go in and sign up for it.
So the next question is, should I follow up if I don't hear back? How do I do this? Should I rewrite the resume and cover letter and resubmit them?
No, don't resubmit anything. You wouldn't be able to resubmit to the actual position if that's what you're referring to, the person who asked the question. I wouldn't do it either with your outreach, but it is appropriate to follow up if you have the manager's information. If you had an interview, I would just be cautious of too much outreach. Might show you as just being a little bit too assertive. Things take time at Yale. Positions do take time to fill. Searches are very thoughtful, and there's sometimes a lot of steps to those searches and the recruitments. So, there's nothing wrong with first reaching out to the recruiter. If we have an update, we'll share it. But if anything, we just, ask for continued patience because sometimes the process does take a while. But if you do feel you need, follow up, it would be certainly appropriate, for a quick statement, just asking where they are in the recruitment.
Andrew, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, I can just share my experience with that. I like to go, and I think we all want answers. It's hard to wait. So I know I would typically respond just saying like a very short thank you. I'm glad we had this time together or whatever. And then if they followed back and said, hey, I'll get, thanks, I'll get back to you sometime later, that to me was, and maybe this isn't for everyone, but I took that as an opportunity to, in a week, if I haven't heard something, I have an in to say, hey, just wanted to follow up. Just wanted to see how things are going with the process or whatever, if you know who it was. And it was in situations like that, that's how I landed an interview, was because they were like, this is great. They wanted that. You're absolutely right. I always found that line of what's being annoying and what's being proactive. And I know with and that's going to be different for everyone. For this job, and why I loved it so much is because that ambitious go-getter type thing, that's what they actually really loved. So that email that I sent, that's what kind of caught them. They were like, this is great. We like someone that's aggressive like this. And aggressive is used in a negative way as it can be used in a positive way. And for them, this was a very good thing. So I reached out after about a week, maybe 2 weeks at most, for some things. And I got positive responses, and no one was ever mean to me. Sometimes they were very short, and it was like, okay, this is the end of that one, but at least we know. And no one ever came after me, so it was always okay, and I don't feel like I burned any bridges by following up after a couple weeks or something. I think it's just reasonable, but that was my experience.
Well, thank you for sharing it. We appreciate it. So our next question. There have been some jobs in the school I currently work at that I would be interested in, but am nervous to apply because my current bosses would almost certainly find out, and I don't want to risk losing the job I have. Do you have any advice for how to approach this when applying internally? Who would like to respond to that? Deb? Do you have a...
I'm going to let Lisa start, and then I'll tag on because she has a little bit more insider information than I do.
So everything is confidential all the time. I just will say that as a blanket statement. However, I would never want anyone to just assume that we know it's confidential. So at the beginning of a search, anyone that comes to me for career counseling or reaches out about a position, I always ask them if it's a confidential search, if their manager knows. And then depending on the circumstances and what they share, then that is how I always say there's certain levels of confidentiality. What I mean, it's always confidential, but if it's something where, I might not recommend applying to a position right away. I might just work with the manager and then they apply to the position. There's just all different ways of doing it. But again, confidentiality is key. So anything you do tell us, it will not be shared.
Great, thank you.
So I just wanted to piggyback on that. And during an interview, I will ask the person, does your manager know? And when we're ready, if we're ready to move forward, I will keep in touch and find out when it will be the appropriate point for me to be able to reach out to that manager. So.
That's good to know. Thank you, Donna. That's great having your perspective on that. Thank you. So our next question, what exactly is a recruiter looking for when they say, tell me about yourself?
Go ahead, Lisa.
I don't know if I ask that question a lot. I personally don't even ask that question because I don't like it myself. I always found it to be one of the hardest questions for me personally. I don't know why. And then I realized I was obviously answering it the wrong way and did a little research on it. But with that said, I think it's really coming back to when you have self-awareness and you know who you are and you are confident in your skill set and your competencies. That's how you look at it when you're speaking to someone about a job. Putting that out there is going to make it a lot easier for you to come from that place versus, well, what do you want to know? And I think that you hear that a lot. I think it's nervousness and not being prepared. That goes back to being prepared. So I think being confident and comfortable with what you bring to the table is key, and that's going to help you answer that question, and then preparing also, even if you have to write it out and record it.
You can always have a pivot answer as well. If you feel uncomfortable with that question, because it's too broad, say, how about, let me tell you about a recent project I just did with X, Y, and Z. So you can pivot and you're still telling them something about yourself that's work related and important information to relay. So I'm a big fan of pivot questions.
That's good advice.
I want to tag on to Lisa's answer too when I'm thinking about this. You know, so in our interviewing class, and I think there's one coming up in April, we do like a whole kind of like a module on this question, and we call it your story, because oftentimes in interviews you will either get this question or a version of this question or something that requires a similar answer to this question. So what I tell people, and either Lisa or Donna just said this, is I type up my answer and I have like a generic shell. And what I start with a generic shell, let me be clear. And what that looks like is a high-level overview of my career. And I'll kind of talk about, you know, a job or an education and a transition. And in the class, we have worksheets to kind of help prepare your story all the way down to present day, and a little bit more time spent on what you're doing today in your role. And then, you know, as you're interviewing for different jobs, you tweak the story to be more relevant to what you're interviewing for. So if your first 4 years of your career have nothing to do with this, you may, you know, either start after that or just brush over, you know, oh, my first job out of school was this, and then I knew I was passionate about this and I transitioned. I think that this is the kind of thing Andrew talked about, saying things aloud earlier that you want to practice aloud, either to yourself, to the mirror. I practice to my dog, your significant other, whatever. It's the kind of thing you do need to say aloud though to hear, and you need to time yourself. In the class that we do, we have people time themselves and tell their story to a partner, because it is something you have to practice. It's also just good to get the cobwebs out, to hear yourself talking about yourself. And I just feel like that high level summary that then you kind of tweak accordingly, it just sort of helps to have it in this document, and then you just sort of change it throughout your career. I started doing that several years ago, and then you build on it, and then you tweak it, and you take stuff out that becomes less important, and you put stuff in that's more important. So always be prepared for that. And then if you're not, you've got Donna's strategy as that backup.
So Deb, what class was that? Is that a class that's open to job seekers?
Yes, it's called Interviewing with Confidence. And let me see if I can go grab the link and pop it in the chat.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question. My current job depends on a grant and renews every year. I will be notified 3 months in advance whether it be renewed or not. I always wonder whether that time period is enough for me to look and apply for other open positions at Yale. Has any panelist ever worked with anyone who is in my situation and had any success in securing another job?
So I'd like to take that one from the other perspective. So in the business office, we're constantly monitoring a PI's faculty balances, how much money they have, can they afford their research enterprise. So we try to have the faculty member be in contact with the people in their labs in case the funding is going to run out. So oftentimes we know way in advance, more than 90 days in advance. And if you get down to the 90-day part, it's generally because the PI is trying to find something, we're trying to find some extra funding. So I think the key to that is stay in touch and communicate frequently with your PI and faculty member to understand, hey, it's 6 months, you know, your grant is ending, should I be worried? And if the faculty member says, I'm really trying hard to find new funds, but don't have them yet, then you should probably start thinking about a job, and also ask that faculty member to shop you, because the faculty member works with other people and they can say, hey, I have this great research assistant. They can do PCR, monoclonal antibodies, everything else. Do you need them? And then oftentimes they can actually find a place for you, or maybe share you until they get funding back in. There's so many creative ways to approach it, and the key is communicating frequently and staying in touch.
That's great advice. Thank you, Donna. A question that's somewhat related to that is if you know, somewhat related to Donna's response actually, is if you knew someone within the department organization for the position you are interested in, is it appropriate to reach out to them to let them know you are interested in the position or that you applied for the position? Who would like to chime in on that?
So personally, yes, I think it's appropriate, when it's appropriate. I think it's networking. Everyone does it. If you want another position, you have to be creative and you have to figure out how you're going to get there. And if you have a connection, if you know someone in another department, you hear of a position, absolutely. One thing that I will recommend is making sure that if you do express interest in the PI, the manager, the department, tells you that, you know, they are interested in you as a candidate, please apply to the position so that we can make sure we qualify you and we follow the standard best practices, that we are reviewing all candidates the same way. So, you know, just please make sure you do submit an application, but it is appropriate within the context of the situation.
Just make sure you tell them it's confidential inquiry, right? So in case you don't want
Oh, right.
to, make sure you mention that confidential inquiry.
Great, thank you. So Lisa, could you elaborate on the actual steps, excuse me, involved in filling up a staff position at Yale?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Could you elaborate on the actual steps involved in filling a staff position at Yale?
Okay, so the actual steps, well, from it's a two-step process with the candidate and obviously the recruiter, actually three, and then the department. So once the candidate submits an application, we qualify them, we send them to the department for review. They will conduct their interviews. Once they have decided on the finalists, they will let us know, and then we will start the reference checking process. And then once the references are complete, then we move to creating the offer and going through the approvals. And then once the offer has been approved, we will extend the verbal offer to the candidate. And if they accept right then and there, it's a great day. And but we always want to make sure we give our candidates time to think about the offer. But once the offer is secured, if it's an internal candidate, there would most likely not be additional background screening requirements needed. And then we would just move through the process of the offer letter and then having them hired to Workday. If it's external, it's a little bit longer with background screening and the new employee orientation after they're hired.
Okay, so is there a typical time frame in which the department likes to try to have this? Is it like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Is there an expectation?
To fill a position?
Yes, from start to finish. Like,
okay, so there's two different sides of that. We, as recruiters, we have metrics. So we do have to, the amount of time it takes for us to fill a position and do all types of parts of filling a position are viewed on a monthly basis and then annually. And then when we look at the department, it's really individual. There are some departments that are lightning speed and we can't keep up with it because they're just, moving along very quickly and they're filling a position. And then there's, some other recruitments that are more thoughtful in the sense that there's more steps involved in their interviewing and their process, so it takes longer. So I've seen some positions be open as long as 6 months. It's just the way it is. But we will always, as recruiters, keep our candidates warm, letting them know that we will reach out at times and let them know that the recruitment is still underway. We appreciate their patience, try to engage if they have any questions. If it's appropriate, we might share benefit information at that time. So it just everything is taken on a case-by-case scenario with each position.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are getting close to the end of our session here. I think we have time for one more question. And the question is it important to name personal references in a cover letter?
No, I would not. You don't, we need permission. Anyone needs permission to speak about you from you. So you would not want to share anything up front that you don't need to. And that just goes for everything. Pictures, birthdays, I said it before, like, why would you give more information than you need to? When you are asked for references, that's when you would supply your references. And if for some reason you did not want to give your current reference, that's perfectly normal. We will just proceed. And then when the time comes, the department will contact your current manager when you have given us permission to do so. But we're not checking references. If you're putting them on a cover letter, you're now giving permission to someone, in essence, to start reaching out about you and your abilities and your experience. So I would say, no, wait until the end, wait till you're asked for them.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to our audience for all of their great questions. We were not able to get to all of the questions, but hopefully we answered or gave everyone a good idea of what it is that they were looking for. Angelina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Karen. I just want to thank all of our audience members for spending the afternoon with us. Special thanks to our distinguished panelists for sharing their expertise, their insight, and guidance. Audience members will receive an email early next week with a short survey and links to resources that we discussed today. We hope you'll all take advantage of the many resources that Yale offers to faculty and staff interested in growing their career at Yale. So thanks again and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone.